Oh my god, I just noticed now, this thing has not the same sized road wheels. What the f? And with that, I welcome you to this new video on the Fauteur, the new tier 11 French heavy tank. And honestly, with it already having some very odd road wheels, it ain't stopping there, boys. It ain't stopping there. Generally speaking, in my honest opinion, might also just be a skill issue, but that tank really sucks. It really does. It really does. It ain't it for me, chief. And today you're going to see some gameplay clips which basically showcase why I despise or really do not like this tank. I'm also explaining to you what are the pros and cons of this vehicle. So let's quickly start with the gun, because that's its whole gimmick, right? The gun basically tries to be a blend between the threes AMX M4, 54 and 51's 120mm gun and 130 or 127mm gun respectively. It blends the damage. You're constantly charging up your gun, giving you up to 500 alpha. And it slowly goes down the more you shoot. If you decide to press a certain key, the one you assigned, you can overcharge the gun. If you're at 500 damage, you immediately go to 600, you double your aim circle, you double your aim time. And that means if you're at 500 damage and you're basically in a brawl situation, you know you're going to brawl, using that gives you an immediate 100 damage surplus. And if you actually time it correctly, you can do even more. We'll see that in just a bit in some clips afterwards. Other than that, it is fairly slow. It doesn't really have good side armor. It only has decent front armor. We get to that in also just a bit. And it has some very annoying weak spots. The main problem with the gun is, while on paper it is basically a better 432U gimmick, the main problem with it is, despite it being a 120mm gun, and yes, it has more alpha than the 120mm gun of the AMX M4, it tries to be in this niche of, hey, you have a little bit more alpha, but your gun handling is pretty decent. Even if you're using bond accuracy, or even if you are using tier 3 experimental aiming unit, which gives you better accuracy and better aim time, you are still quite a long shot away of the 120mm guns gun handling. Yes, you have better gun handling when you compare it to the 130mm of the AMX M4, but that's about it. Just the AMX M4 does have premium AP, so it does have a bit better normalization, and it does 560 all the time. While with this tanks, after a couple of shots, you are down to 420 alpha basically, which is bog standard. Where, for example, the BlackRock has 450 all the time. You know, you get the gist. So that makes the tank really freaking frustrating to play, because you still have enough weak spots that you basically need to try to work with your gun handling. But the gun handling is worse than what the previous tank had to offer, while having, yes, one weak spot in quotation mark less, but the weak spots you have is still massive. So with that out of the way, I think it is time we jump into the clips so you know what I'm talking about. In the first clip, we basically are at this 500 damage threshold, and we are using a stabilizer. Keep that in mind. And hey, yeah, cool, 540 alpha right there. Yes, we got snapped in return, but it is what it is. More important is now the next spot. I saw a Fauteur driving towards us. I was able to preheat the gun already. We are now at 630 alpha, and we roll him for 650. We do a little bit of wiggling because it does have pretty decent armor against APCR, and here I made a massive mistake. You can quickly rewind it, and you can see that I'm just before 500 alpha, which would have jumped back to 600 damage. And as you can see now, because we shot all of our shots, we are back down to 625 alpha, which is more or less the same what a T803 has to offer, just that the T803 does have better gun handling and the DPM ability. Once again, we go into the overheat mode as we drive up very quickly here, and bang! That is great! We do 660 damage to the new monkey. You know, that is awesome. That is boats loads of damage. But after that shot, you can see we are already down and we are not even able to get close to the overheat potential. So we got one funky damage shot, but because we didn't fully heat it up, it is what it is. We do get another cupola snipe in, and hey, you know, pretty decent. We got 2 shots in, we are already at 1k damage, and we are basically using everything to our advantage. And we are trying to stay hull down, we are baiting the people. There is an enemy Fauteur, and we are able to actually snap him. And we are using experimental turbo because with how, in my opinion, bad the gun handling feels. Fully upgraded, by the way. This is all fully upgraded clips. It kind of needs it, and I might have a bold claim. I generally do believe this tank, because of the constant heat up mechanic, could theoretically be played without rammer. However, the gun is supposed to be decently accurate, 0.3. Okay, I didn't aim that fully. That's on me, I guess, lads. That's on me. But that is 380 meters away. And we miss again. And right now, our gimmick is basically gone. We are down to the same alpha a BlackRock or a T803 has. And we miss again. So, basically, our gimmick is gone. And we are not in bad accuracy mode or anything. We are now basically, at this point, a worse AMX M4. As our DPM is similar, but we are a tier higher. And that really does suck. Obviously, I don't want to, how should we say, not show you this. Yes, 900 damage, har. Ape tank is very funny. We get one more shot out and it's over. At least we did 4.4k damage. But we can't do much. Here, we already traded pretty poorly at the beginning of the game. However, we are now fully heated up. We are at 650 alpha, right? That is going to slam ram the enemy into its face. I'm trying to bait the KL1 to do something, that he gets a little bit closer so we have easy shots. And he actually does it, which is really cool. And bang! 660 damage. That is awesome. And because we're fully heated, we immediately get back to 600 alpha. But because we have worse accuracy thanks to the gimmick, we missed that shot, and now we are back to just doing 460, 470 alpha, which is still worse than what the KR1 has to offer. Also, the gun depression of just 8 degrees very often kind of made me freak out a little bit. Hey, we still killed him, it is something, but you know, we are basically done for. Now here we were able to get quickly in a good position. We get a free shot into the enemy BlackRock, but because nothing really can be done here thanks to 3 DBVs in the background, we have to position ourselves somewhere differently, which is this going to be. And we are heating up right here. I know the beast was just shooting, so we are able to slam him for 650. Again, this is the good part of this tank. If you can brawl in this tank, you can do quite a lot. I also try to bait the enemies with what you would do with the Panzerkampfwagen 7, right? Where you showcase just a little bit of your lower plate. It is fairly bouncy in that regard. But whatever, we are fully heated up. At this distance, we can slam the Canoper. We are not as inaccurate as the Canoper, which is pretty decent. Plus, we are using a stabilizer, so our gun handling ain't too bad. And here you can see I tried to peek the RagingRaptor, tried to get him, but it is what it is. Speaking of armor, we try to aim in, and you can see we miss because it has very, very poor aim time. It is like half a second worse than the 120mm gun of the AMX M4. And it also doesn't hit. And again, these are 450 meters, and Imbataba, it's that easy for him. He hits a cupola and he hits 3 times the lower plate. So, by the way, that was a 0 damage game. I just want to say that. So, when we just saw us getting completely murdered by the armor, let's have a look at the armor profile of the tank. Right here, we are comparing it to the APCR of the BlackRock, and you're like, what the hell are you on about, Raging? Do you have a massive skill issue? Why do you not bounce anything? Look at that. Standard rounds, it only can penetrate this and it can penetrate the cupola. By the way, fun story. Quite a lot of section over here, you can still bounce into the cupola. And the cupola is 100 to 120 millimeters thick compared to 230 of the T803. So, that is fair, yes. That looks insane. It's just red. Wow, new meta tank, right? Hold down heavy tank. what happens on tier 11 is most people are shooting gold ammunition, and well, while this was already a massive weak spot regardless, the whole lower plate also gets very easily, and as soon as you're tiny bit below him, it is becoming a lot easier to penetrate. So, one thing which is actually pretty decent about this tank, you actually can fairly easily, decently side scrape with this vehicle, because these plates are quite a lot thicker and more angled than what the AMX M4 has to offer. Right now you can see we have to over angle and then we go from outer bounce to outer pen over here, but if you stay like this and we are loading heat rounds, you can see that only the weak spots are here. This is a 50-50, which is pretty decent because you can actually try to gun block it with heat, but you can see this spot back here, that is also a biggity split weak spot, meaning that you can't really do much about that, right? You can't really side scrape. You can try to bait people, but it's super hard when they have quite a big weak spot. It is probably as big as your cupola, especially as you start turning your turret. Great. Fantastic. So, when we go now to the Gorilla, because I think this is a very important comparison. The Gorilla right now is a tank you will always see constantly, thanks to it being very easy to play, and it has 800 alpha. Fantastic. So, what are you going to see here? Is that, yes, once again, the upper plate starts to become pennable, the lower plate is very easily pennable, and if you angle, these plates are also fairly easy to penetrate. The main problem is most Gorilla players are not going to shoot AP rounds, because why should they? They have 385mm of APCR pen. And that suddenly results in your whole upper plate, as well as your turret, starting to become very easy to penetrate. And you might say, yeah, but Raging, it is a hold down heavy tank. Yes, I get that. So we go into the hold down, which is slightly more than this. Still, these are massive weak spots. If you just angle a little bit over because you want to hit the lower plate of the Gorilla, for example, or something like that, they can still slam through here. You still have quite a big cupola. And if you go back to the Black Rock, again, we are in a hold down. We have to go a little bit further. You still see a massive cupola weak spot, and you see this weak spot. And if you go to APCR, still massive cupola weak spot. And the other main problem I had in my gameplay session of, well, it was just games, but still, you so often don't get a good position to play with your 8 degrees of gun impression. You always feel like you have to hour angle a little bit, and then everybody has your lower plate regardless. And if you try to side scrape, because many maps also don't really have good cooldowns, yeah, they just slam you through right here. Bada bang, bada booyah. So, where does this leave us? This leads us to, on one hand, massive skill issue on my personal opinion, on the other hand, just a tank which ain't fun. And I don't think it is a lot wargaming needs to change with this thing, because from my biggest gripe with it was, generally speaking, stupid gun handling. If the gun handling wouldn't be as atrocious, and I'm not talking about the overcharge damage, right? The 600 damage range. I'm talking about the box standard 450 to 500 alpha range. If there, the gun handling would be more closely aligned to what the AMX M4 with the 120mm gun has. Because, again, after 1 or 2 shots, you are down on the same damage level as a T803, you know? Just a T803 basically shoots 3 seconds quicker than you when it's fully upgraded or fully loaded. So, it just makes this tank so incredible, infuriating to play. And the ability, more or less, is useless, you know? Yes, it is better than what the Object 432U has to offer in that regard. The 432U is still whack as hell. And yes, it is more comfy to play because obviously it's a heavy tank, it has better armor, and it has better gun impression than the 432U when we compare it. But then again, it's a medium versus heavy tank. The main problem is, though, if you want to play a heavy tank, which is decent in hold down, you usually go for the T803. It has better gun handling, better TPM, better pen. If you want to actually be really strong in hold down, I don't know, Chief, you can play the Black Rock, right? Or you can play the Contriever. Contriever basically has similar speed, and it actually feels more bouncy than the Fauteur. If you want to play a proper heavy tank, play the Taschenratte. Like, it's that easy. Just play the Taschenratte. The main thing is, if you want to play this tank, you just have to give wargaming so much, while the tank itself gives you so little, and other options are simply better. And yeah, I know not every tank needs to be imba. I get that. I totally get that. With the Fauteur, it's just like you are getting handicapped by the belief that, hey, you more or less will feel very similar to what you are used to then get completely ruffle stomp because you ain't getting used to that, you know? It's basically like going from the Badger to the AS40. Because the AS40 plays more or less completely different than to the Badger. Badger, sneaky, AS40, fat, chunky, can do a lot of clip damage. And with the Fauteur, you go from a pretty decent, oh, I'm just looking forward tank with good gun handling and then technically a 560 alpha gun, which always does 560. You go to a tank which has better side armor, yeah, sure, but it feels like weaker full armor because everybody's going to penetrate you anyway because most of the players are playing gold rounds regardless, so your armor is kind of useless. Having the gun handling of the 130mm gun with the alpha of a slightly buffed 120mm gun. And especially now with the Gorilla being in the game, which just feels very comfy to play, and the Executor being there, which is an amazing medium, like goodbye Leopard 120, why should you play the Fauteur? Why? It makes no sense. But enough yapping. Thank you so much for watching. I went a little bit too much. I didn't want to go this far with my yapping. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you around in the next video on the monkey.